Have you been to the gym already this morning and everything?
Already been to the gym, done all my work, answered my emails. I'm ready for a Art Dealer Diary segment with Howard Post.
Cool.
How about you? You been to the gym or been on a horse?
My wife and I are walking. We find different places to walk and hike around Tucson.
Yeah, you're now in Tucson.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Back home after 40 years away.
40 years away from Tucson.
I drove by the old place this morning on River Road there.
Yeah, so the old place is where you grew up, right?
Yeah.
And
it's now Brandy Fenton Park.
And your family gave that land for the park, or what?
No. After my folks died, my brother built a stable there, and ran that for about 5 years, and then we decided to sell the property. And the Fenton family, their daughter had been killed in a car accident near there, they decided they wanted to build a park and memorial for her, so they bought the land, and in conjunction with the county, they made that park there.
And so that's where you grew up, was where that park is. So it's pretty much like it was when you grew up, or not?
There was 30 acres there when I grew up, and there was a lot of places along there that were about that same size, 20, 30 acres.
And this is off of River and Dodge-ish?
River, between Dodge and Campbell.
Yep.
Raul Castro lived a half mile down the road from us, the former governor.
Yeah.
And the Jewish Community Center moved in and has a big development right down there. But the house that I grew up in is still there. They made it into a caretaker's facility. But all the rest, they've turned into soccer fields. And
yeah, have you been in that house since then?
Looked in the window.
Yeah. And now, how many kids did your folks have?
4. I'm the youngest of 4, 3 boys and the oldest sister.
And so you grow up in Tucson. So let's back it up. So, by the way, we have Howard Post here today, if anybody was wondering. He's a great American painter of the West in a contemporary style, and I've represented him for over 20 years. So this is one of those fun interviews you get to do because you know the guy, you've spent time with the guy, you know what kind of individual he is, and so it's really the audience gets the joy of hearing what I already know. But I want to back it up because I want to see if I can learn a little bit too. So, when did the Post family first get to Arizona and/or Tucson?
So my mother was born in Mexico, in what they call the Mormon colonies. There was a lot of farms and ranches down in Mexico, south of Deming. They're still there, a lot of them.
And where in Mexico would this be?
There's a Deblon, Juarez, Oaxaca, these little, no big cities, just little farming communities.
And these were all Mormon kind of outposts?
Well, back in the day, Brigham Young sent people to settle all over the West,
right,
including down there.
Right.
And also because they were practicing polygamy back, this was 1850, 60, so they were still the practice of polygamy, and so when the government decided they were going to start cracking down on that, they went down there to Mexico, some of them. But the church did away with polygamy, and so that ended, but they still had all these beautiful farms down there. And anyway, my mother was born down there, but Pancho Villa decided that he hated Americans, and he threatened to kill them all if they didn't leave the country. So.
And this was 1910, 1913-ish?
10, 12.
Yeah, right when Pancho Villa was doing his stuff. So they were run out of Mexico by Pancho Villa?
Yeah, they just left
everything,
got wagons and made it up to Deming, I think, got on train and came to the Tucson area. They actually settled in St. David,
Arizona,
Benson area.
Oh, yeah. And what time frame was that? Was that right about 1912?
Yeah.
So about the time that Arizona's becoming a state, Pancho Villa is pushing your mom, right? Is your mother out, and so she ends up in St. David, which I don't know where that is actually.
Benson,
Oh, I know where Benson is.
That's right.
So that's
just,
there. Sorry about all those St. David listeners out there.
It's nothing. It's just a little farm community.
Yeah.
It's 10 miles east on the river there.
Yeah.
So there's no reason that you'd know it. You would go through it if you go to Tombstone.
Yeah.
And but Benson was the rail center,
So she grew up basically there.
Yeah. My dad did as well. His family came from Kansas
Mm-hmm.
and came to St. David area as well.
And what year would have that been that they were coming?
About that same time, actually.
Yeah. So they were leaving Kansas for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
Yeah.
Was there a reason, like being
There's-
pushed out for
No,
religious reasons, or
No,
it just said, "Let's go. It's too not hot enough here
looking
in
for
Kansas."
a place to work and farm and all that.
Yeah.
So. Also, my wife's family, same story. They weren't in Mexico, but actually, don't quote me on. Don't let her see this because
Okay.
I can't remember the details.
Marilyn, do not watch this or listen to this, please.
Can't remember the details of her family getting there, but anyway, so both of our families, were raised around the St. David Benson area.
Uh huh.
There's still ranches there. My cousins have ranches right next to Karchner Caverns.
Yeah.
Is the Post Ranch.
Did they know about the caverns?
They did.
They did.
Actually, her family and my wife's family owned that land
Uh huh.
way back. And they knew about the caves, but there was too many rattlesnakes, and so they didn't mess with it,
So they knew about them, but everybody just kind of ignored
Yeah.
it. It was like there's some old
Yeah.
caves down there. This is now what, a national
Yeah.
monument? Is that what it is?
They had sold it to the the Karchners
Yeah.
in between, and then the Karchners made the deal and sold it to the National Park Service.
Yeah.
So
That's funny. My mom grew up in West Texas, and she would go to Carlsbad Caverns before it was a national park
Yeah.
or whatever it is, monument, and they would have like little headlights with candles that they would go and explore on their own, because that was, just, there's some big caverns down near where they lived, and it was no big deal. And now, of course,
you've been there?
oh yeah, of course,
We enjoy Carlsbad. We think that's
yeah, no, that's a
a
great
cool
area.
place.
So your dad and mom grew up in Benson, right?
St. David.
I mean, okay, sorry
Well,
again, St. David.
That's-
Did it again, St. David, and then so when did they move up to Tucson? Because you grew up in Tucson, right?
Right. So my dad did a lot of jobs, but he worked ran a big road grader,
Mm-hmm.
building roads around the country. The road to Mount Lemmon he helped build, as a grader operator. But
Mhm.
he also had a dream. He started a feed store, hay and feed store.
Bum Post was it? His name was Bum Post, right?
Orville Kelvin Post was his official name,
Yeah.
but everybody called him Bum
Yeah.
for whatever reason. We're not sure. So he started that store at Dodge and Fort Lowell.
Still there, right?
It is. They call it OK Feed. He
Yeah.
called it Post OK Feed
Right.
after his initials.
Yeah.
And he sold that in the mid-'70s, I believe. So
And so you grew up in Tucson working at that feed store?
I was actually born when they actually lived behind the store. The family did
Uh-huh.
in that little thing, and
Where were you born in Tucson?
St. Mary's
At St.
Hospital.
Mary's, yeah.
So then, right about in there, when I was 5, I believe they bought the land on River Road
Mm-hmm.
and moved the family out there. So, but we all grew up working at that store.
And so what would you do as a kid in that? Because you probably worked there most of your life, right, as a kid. I mean,
Yeah.
I can see you working through high school probably, did you?
When I was real young, they had me doing irrigation on the place on River Road.
Oh,
Had
yeah.
flood irrigation. That was my
That's-
job.
That's super fun.
And chopping weeds and etc. But when I got a little older and I could do it, I worked in the store,
Mhm.
behind the counter. I mostly delivered hay. We had a delivery truck and load on 20 bales and take it out.
Did you have to load
to
the
river.
hay?
Yeah. So
I did
no-
that as a kid. I know how fun that
no
is.
forklifts.
Yeah, no, back labor.
The worst job was my dad would truck the hay down from the Mesa area. He had these big 2 semis, and his boys were the only ones that could get to work besides Hispanic fellows
Right.
that may or may not have been illegal immigrants. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
Well, we won't tell anybody
yeah.
in the Trump administration.
But he had a couple Mexican fellows that were the best guys ever that were with him for 20 years. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he would send a truck up in the morning. We'd go up into a farm in Mesa area. We'd load up, 400 bales by hand with a conveyor belt.
Wow.
Bring it down, either unload it at the store or deliver it to one of the ranches around southern Arizona. So.
And how old were you when you were doing that kind of stuff?
I think 14 probably is about when I was capable of
Yeah.
doing that.
And you were, so that's how you built your big shoulders and chest, lifting those big.
Actually, it did help with that, but it's more technique. During the summer, we'd get football players from the high schools come and want to load hay, to get in shape. And
Right.
They usually last 2 or 3 days because it's not just muscle; it's
No, it's
technique.
Yeah, how to flip it up there.
And it was hot and dirty and not pleasant work.
And at the same time, though, you were doing a couple other things. One, you were already interested in art, right?
Yeah, I had decided that would be my passion in life, and I had sketchbooks there in the store. When you're sitting behind the counter and retail. I mean,
I do know
when
retail.
long time you're sitting there for a long time and nothing happening.
And do you still have those books?
Yeah, I do. My mom saved everything.
Oh, I got to see those sometimes. You have to bring those in.
I have to dig
I
those
promise
out.
I won't try to sell them.
They're in boxes somewhere in the garage. When we made the move,
Yeah.
there's tons of.
And the move he's talking about is he just moved. He's grew up in Tucson, lived in north of Tucson for a long time, and just came back. So.
Yeah, we after I taught at the U of A for a couple of years, and that position ended. I went up, took a job for the big ad agency in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
We were there, and then I began freelancing illustration and painting. I was painting all that time. The work started selling enough that I kind of gradually moved out of the illustration field.
I want to get back to when you were third
okay.
grade. Yeah,
Third
when you were
grade.
third grade, you entered. Was it third grade? You entered
Yeah.
your teacher entered. You had drawn
Yeah.
something, and she had entered it. She entered it into the newspaper. And tell us about that.
Yeah, my real goal in life at that point was to be a cowboy like my dad.
Yeah.
But Mrs. Williams entered this drawing in the contest down at the Tucson Daily Citizen.
Right.
I won first prize, got my picture in the paper, got some prizes, and figured this was fame
Easy
and
living, right?
Fame and fortune.
Yeah, fat on the hog. That's all right. And so, but you at that point, you were already interested in art, and that or was that the thing that really kind of?
I mean, I drew just like other kids. You know,
not all kids
I mean,
draw that.
my drawing wasn't, I don't think, any better than anybody's. But once they gave me that reinforcement, it was like
It really
okay.
was a pivotal moment then.
Yeah, it was like, oh, okay, this is my calling in life,
And so you did that throughout.
So then I drew a lot, and my mom put me in some private art classes. And
Oh, wow.
high school, I was the guy that made the posters, and then I went to the U of A, and everybody said I wanted to be a painter, but they said my goal was to paint the West,
Right.
paint cowboys, but everybody said you can't make a living as a painter. You got to be a graphic designer, illustrator. So I said, okay, well, I majored in graphic design and illustration
Right.
at the U of A, which was good because that was the only thing that had some discipline. And the studio art classes I'm not putting down U of A. They're pretty typical of most colleges.
Mm-hmm.
Studio art classes were like abstract impressionism or conceptual art or
Right.
whatever. There was nobody teaching you
Western art.
well, not Western, but even disciplined figurative art. you know.
Yeah, right. It was not
It
in
was
vogue.
just like
And what year was that you were at the U of A?
I graduated in 72.
1972 you graduated. So you went from about 68 to 72. But before, when you got into the U of A, you were also doing something beforehand, which you were doing rodeo, right? In high school, you were a rodeo. I mean, you were a very significant rodeo guy. What tell us about that? That was a very interesting time frame.
Yeah. So my dad, he had been rodeoed,
and he had rode in professional or
professional.
He had. Okay. Well, so he was good. What was his sport?
The roping, team roping.
Yeah.
Calf roping, but he didn't do it as a vocation. He had the store,
right,
which is typical of most guys in rodeo. Even today, they have other jobs. They go on weekends.
Yeah, even the big guys today.
There's a handful of big guys that do it.
Yeah,
exclusively if they get sponsors.
Yeah,
but typically the guys, work on a ranch or something, and then go on the weekends and so that's what my dad did. And my older brother, he got into it big time. He was a college champion, and so I started about 12. They have junior rodeos, they call them, so from ages 6 and on up, they have events, for kids, and so I did junior rodeo, and that I won in that, and that was fueled the flame a little bit. And high school, they have high school rodeos, just like, they have national high school rodeo. So if you win the state championship, which I did, you qualify to go to the national high school championship, where every state sends their top 2.
Yeah, how'd you do with that?
My dad didn't let me go because we were working,
Yeah, so you didn't.
We're running the store, So.
Do you have anger about that at all because you didn't get to go?
No.
Not even at that time?
No, not really.
Oh, good for you.
Because
I would have.
So about that time when I was in high school, I was also started competing in professional level events. You can do that on what they call it on a permit, like a trial basis, until you win enough to get an official card carrying member of the Professional Cowboys Association. So I was competing even in high school in pro events, but on a permit, So
You remember the first time you got on a bull?
No. Well, in junior rodeo, they rode steers or smaller animals, and I did that. So I don't know, 12 probably.
Yeah.
But then in high school, you start riding bulls.
Right.
And I did pretty well in high school.
What was that like? What's that like to get on a mad, angry animal? At least they seem mad and angry.
Oh, it's a buzz, adrenaline rush. And
it has to be, right?
It's a buzz.
Does it just go flying through like that 6 seconds, 7 seconds? You don't.
It's 8 seconds, and it seems
for
like,
me it would be less than 8.
It seems like forever, actually.
I'm sure.
But.
And do you learn how to get off a bull? You must, right?
So you practice. You build bucking barrels. So you have build a barrel, and you put ropes, guide wires around, and with springs, and you get on there and get guys that pull that barrel and make it act like a
predate of the mechanical bull.
Yeah, they have mechanical. So we did that, of course.
So you'd learn because they try to flip you off, and you just try to figure out how to fall.
Yeah,
almost like an acrobat.
Well, that's the catch. So in high school, they use animals that are not as fast or big for the kids, and so I did well there. In college, they start using the professional level bull.
Right.
And the first times that I did in college, they're so fast and big that you don't. It's not like you learn how to fall. I mean,
they teach you.
The momentum of them just slams you.
Right.
So after a couple times of being slammed, I thought, I think I'll stick to roping. I mean, I'm better at that anyway. So
yeah.
So I quit bull riding.
And that was in college. So you started out in college being in the rodeo team, right?
Yeah.
As well as in the art department?
Yeah.
I wonder if that's the first ever, and still.
Might be.
It might be. And so what was that?
That was weird,
that had to be a real dichotomy, because you're playing in 2 different worlds. What was that like?
It was I felt estranged from both of them, actually.
Yeah, I could see it.
You know, and since I was on the rodeo team on campus, they would have promo events for the rodeo team,
Mhm.
you know, to try to sell tickets and stuff. So we would be doing events for that, you know, and so that was, the art people thought, well, this, where's this guy from, you know?
Yeah. Well,
But the rodeo guys, who were all in the ag college,
yes.
except for me, they thought this art guy was pretty weird, you know. So.
And so how did you finally deal with that? Because at some point there must have come a point where you go, okay, I got to pick a team.
I didn't ever have to decide between the two.
No.
I mean, they accepted.
And did you do rodeo throughout your whole college career?
On the college team, after I left, went on a mission for our church, and when I came back, Marilyn and I decided to get married, so I didn't do the rodeo team thing anymore.
Yeah, so you had learned some other things about life. And where did you go on that mission? Where was that?
I went to Central States, which was headquartered in Kansas City.
Uh-huh. Back where your dad came from.
Yeah. It was all over the 8, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas.
Yeah, what's that like to do a mission? That's 2 years, right?
Yeah. That's a great experience.
I've heard that before.
It's voluntary. You pay your own way.
Mm-hmm.
And they have adult mission presidents who, like in our area, there was like 200 young guys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a adult director and his wife who tell you where to go and direct you and give you assignments. And so we traveled a lot, met a lot of people, and tried to learn how to talk.
Right.
You know, I mean,
So that's where you got this gift of gab?
Well, the concept is, even as a missionary, it wasn't like we were trying to force ourselves onto people. If people had a question or something, we would try to answer that, you know. So I guess I have that same feeling today, you know. I don't want to insert myself into somebody's life unless they want me to.
Right.
You know, so.
I want you to.
Okay.
You're fine to do.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, so did you paint or draw or anything when you were on the mission? I mean,
I had a sketchbook.
So you did.
Yeah. Not a lot, you know, just sketched.
Yeah, you were focusing on what you needed to
Yeah.
do. And you came back, 2 years of that. Then you had another 2 years in college, correct? You got married at that time,
Yeah,
right?
Marilyn, I guess it was a year after I'd been back, we got married. But Marilyn had finished. She had a job in finance,
Mm-hmm.
which has been very helpful.
Yeah.
Without her,
Those slow periods when Medicine Man Gallery isn't doing its job, that you still have a check coming in.
we'd be a mess without her, you know.
Yeah.
And a year after we got married, we had our first child. So rodeo, actually, I just stopped. You know, I just quit.
Right.
And
Well, you quit in that sense, but you continue to rope, right? I mean, you're still roping, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, well, I even quit roping for like 15 years.
Oh, wow.
My dad wanted me. I would go out to his place and rope with him, you know, because he wanted me to. And he was getting older, and I helped him with the horses. And he roped till he was 80. I had to put him on his horse, you know.
Yeah.
And so I did that, but I didn't do a lot of competition or anything like that.
So yeah, what were your parents' feelings about you going into the art world? I mean, you know, that's really different than probably he could imagine it for you as a profession. Was there discussions about maybe you should do something else?
My mom, of course, was totally supportive of whatever I thought I wanted to do. You know, my dad.
Yeah, she got you art lessons.
Yeah. My dad, he was hoping that one of the boys would take over the store, the business. You know, none of us wanted to, of course, because
he'd worked it.
It's hard and dirty and sitting behind a desk all day. You know.
Right.
So, but so when I told him I was going to be an artist, he said, "Well." The classic thing was like, well, great, but what the heck are you going to do for a living? That's what he said.
Right.
And also, when I came home from my mission, my dad thought I would go pro rodeo, because I don't, not ego thing here, but I was good enough to have done that. You
Right.
know? So when I got home, he had a truck and a trailer and a couple horses ready for me to go, and I said, Dad, I'm not doing that, you know.
Yeah.
So it probably hurt him a little bit there, but
Yeah.
but he
Because
got it.
you think that's because that might have been his real dream.
He probably would have liked to have done that.
Yeah.
And he apparently saw that I had the potential to
Right.
do that. Fortunately, I didn't, because I know guys that did go ahead and do that, and they made some money then and did well and won championships. But after that, they're nothing. You know, when you get to the end of that career, there's no
Right. There's no exit strategy.
They're just
Plus, you're beat up and hurt, right?
You don't have any other real skills. You know.
Yeah. I mean, you've hurt yourself enough. I know. I saw you wince in here one time with a broken shoulder, right? not that long ago,
That was
actually.
2013.
Yeah.
That was that one. But
Yeah.
early on, the only other big injury I had was I broke my arm
Mm-hmm.
in bulldogging. You know, where you jump off your horse,
Right.
and if you miss the steer and hit the ground,
Hit the ground hard.
it's a little bit hard, you know. So that was my only big injury then. Yeah, so fortunate that I didn't go that way, but it is a great sport, and still enjoy competing in
Mm-hmm.
semi-pro events. They have what they call the senior pro
Right.
rodeo. That's for old has-beens, you know, that like in golf, you know,
Right.
50 and over events.
And you won a truck, right? You and roping about 10 years ago?
2006, I think that one
Yeah.
was. Yeah, they have events all over the West, and to entice people to come sign up, they offer prizes and trucks. They have truck ropings all the time now. It's a kind of an old hat, you know, but
Yeah.
But at the time there wasn't too many of them. And my son had actually wanted to. I have one son who's really pretty skilled as well.
Mm-hmm.
He did go to the national finals in high school.
Wow.
We took him, and but he went on to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So now he can.
So he's still bulldogging.
He's still roping, but so anyway, there was this roping up, truck roping, and he wanted to go to it. I wasn't planning to go, and he said, "I want to win that truck," and so we went.
Mm-hmm.
But I won the truck. And
Did you give it to him?
Not at the time, but I
Later
later
on.
sold it to him at a good price. You know.
So you go through college, U of A, you go to Mission, you come back, you get your BFA, right, in fine arts, and then what happens after that?
So I had two offers. Hallmark Cards in Kansas City
Mm-hmm.
offered me a job, and I went back there and looked at the place. There was
And you
three-
knew Kansas City because
Yeah.
you'd done your
I
mission
like
there.
Kansas City is great, actually.
Yeah.
Part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back, but 300 artists in these little cubicles was
Didn't seem like
not real appealing to me. But
Right.
at the same time, the LDS Church, who has an art department of like 30 artists
Mhm.
producing work for magazines and books and etc., offered me a position. So we went there to Salt
and
Lake.
that was in Salt Lake City. And so how long were you at that position? For a couple years?
3 years.
3 years.
I was there when the U of A actually called me. The guys that had been my professors called and said, "Hey, we need somebody to fill this faculty position for a lady who was on sabbatical for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Would you come and do that? You know, would you like to come and do it? You know?" I said, "Well, yeah. Sure," because I was wanting to. I had it in my mind I wanted to paint, right? So
Right.
I thought that'd be a great opportunity to.
Actually expose those chops and,
Yeah.
and maybe get back to Tucson too? Was
yeah,
that?
Yeah, being back by the family was.
Mm-hmm.
So in the three, you teach 3 days a week. You have that other time to.
And what year was this, like 77, 78? 75?
75 to 78. Something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So when I was there teaching, I found out that you can take classes for $5 if you're on the faculty.
Yep.
And the first one was that I found out if I'd had a master's degree that the pay scale would have
Goes up.
doubled, right? So I thought, well, I'll get a master's. Then when I teach in my next gig, I'll, make more money,
Right.
right? So I signed up for the master's program, but since I was already on the faculty, my professor said, well, just do stuff and show us at the end of the year, so, which is what I did, and had my thesis shown.
Right. Tell us about that. So, because what kind of painting style were you doing at this point in time? What was the thematic?
As an illustrator, I did every style, I mean, I did really tight renderings. I did pen and ink, watercolor, pastel, oil, so. And my heroes at the time were the CA artists, and I thought, well, that's what I should do. But I really wasn't happy with that, the old traditional.
Right.
Nothing against them, but for me it wasn't.
Right. You enjoyed it. They were meant to kind of, but when you looked at it in your own artwork, it didn't cause you to be excited.
So one of my professor friends said, Howard, to throw out all those magazines, just go out to your dad's place, and I want you to do some big 40 by 60 canvases of stuff you grew up with. So I did that, and that was when I had the epiphany, if you will, that I discovered my thing, and I did these canvases real direct, and big, and and using my own sense of design and color. I wasn't referring to anybody. It was just me, what came out of my head.
And a lot of those images are kind of from a high angle, kind of more. Did that start at that point?
No, I hadn't officially started, but they were. I was getting up on the fences, and so it had a little elevated angle.
Would you go up and take photos or little drawings and things?
I had photos. I did some drawings, but mostly photos. I mean, I just went out there and shotgunned everything that interested me, Didn't try to make any preconceived designs about what I should be doing. Just whatever buzzed me, I would take photos. And so I did that whole series, which ended up being my thesis show. And so Elaine Horwitz happened to see that show. I was at the University Museum, and she saw it and called and said, hey, want to be in my gallery, which was a real buzz, because at that time she was the
top dog,
the deal in
this is 78 maybe.
Yeah.
And so what was that like? What did you think at that point in time when Elaine Horowitz, who has her galleries in like I don't know if she had them in 3 cities then, but she would at some point.
So the problem was she loved my work, but her director in Scottsdale didn't really love my work. So it didn't make it on the wall too much, It was in the back room, and he didn't promote it, so nothing was happening. And I had another gallery. There was a gallery here in town called the K. Bonfoy Gallery.
Yeah, sure.
Way back, who had a couple of shows for me, but my stuff was jarring. It didn't fit into any category, and it wasn't way contemporary, and it wasn't traditional, certainly, and so it was hard for them to market it.
Right, they couldn't figure out where
do you go with this, So anyway, things hadn't started selling at that point. So I took a job in a big ad agency in Phoenix, and was painting. I'd work there and then come home and paint,
And you think that ad agency gave you something that translates through your career now, that it taught you some things?
It gave me ulcers.
There you go. It told you didn't want to be an ad agency.
So I was an art director, and the pressure was intense, deadlines and working with people, and management was just terrible.
So you weren't really getting to create as much as just control the creative
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. So as an art director, you
Yeah.
make the decision. You hire artists or photographers
Right.
or come up with concepts, which was I was pretty good at concepts. Was good, you know, and thinking outside the box. You know, but so along the way, what artist reps would come in with their portfolios to show me,
Right.
and I'm going, hey, I illustrate as good as these guys, you know. So I got a rep, and he went out and was
Did that.
repping my work while I was in the agency. So eventually I quit that agency and was a freelance guy, and I had that rep in New York.
Wow.
I got stuff there in Phoenix, but all the time I was painting still. So at one end of my studio I had a table for my illustration, and the other end was my easel. And if I didn't have an assignment, I would be painting, you know. So in the meantime, Suzanne Brown had taken me on. Suzanne and Elaine were originally partners.
Right.
Then they had this thing where they literally hated each other. And I don't want to go into that one, but Julie Sassy has it in her book that's coming out.
Right. I've interviewed her.
Okay.
Yeah.
She asked me about that for her book, and I tried not to get into any of that kind of stuff. Let them.
But there was an anger there that
There
wasn't.
was, yeah.
Yeah. So Suzanne, when did she start repping you? When was this? When would this have been, approximately?
80 or 82, maybe. Something like
And was she representing Ed Mel too at that time?
that. Ed came in a little bit later. I think.
Who else would have been there at that time? Do you remember?
Veloy Vigil.
Yeah.
Joe Don Baker.
Yeah.
Merrill Mahaffey. Was Billy Shank in there?
Might have been.
All the
Yeah. Ones, a lot of her which are still
Yeah.
great artists today. So she had a wonderful stable
so
of
she
artists.
was yeah. So it was Elaine, Suzanne doing contemporary
Right.
West
In Scottsdale.
in Scottsdale.
Yeah. And so how did that change your career when you got into a gallery like that?
She did well with the work.
She found the voice.
Yeah. And I had to fight for it a little bit because she was so anxious to sell work. If there was an image that was really people wanted, you know,
Right.
she would say, Howard, well, do me 10 of these, you know.
Right.
And I resisted that, you know,
Right.
real hard because imitating yourself I think is not a good thing. I guess we all do in some form, you know, but not consciously taking an image and
Yeah. Hopefully I've never done that to you.
You've been great in terms of you've encouraged whatever direction I wanted to go, you
Right.
know, which is not all galleries do that, you know.
Yeah.
I can see that being hard for a young artist coming in. And I guess I was still a young up-and-coming artist when I was with her, you know, so the temptation is there.
It is. And gallerists can do that, and they will do that. Some
Yeah.
of them, if they get things that are selling snow paintings or whatever, and they're like, give me only snow paintings, which really takes the freshness out of the painting, in my opinion.
Yeah, it needs to be generated in your head, you know, otherwise you're going to be at a dead end, right?
Yeah.
If somebody else is telling you what to paint, at some point,
Yeah, you're just working for them as a...
yeah. So when young artists have come to me over the years asking for advice about getting started, I've always said, well, try to have an independent source of income so that you can control what you do. You don't have to rely on
a gallery.
On those guys to tell you what to do. You know, you can stay independent
Right.
as much as you
Keep
can.
another job on the side until you're good enough that you...
Yeah. So my illustration then served to that purpose. You know, I still had that coming as long as I wanted it.
So you were doing that when you started with Suzanne. You were still doing some of that?
I mean, I never officially. I had a couple of reps, and they would come and say, "Hey, you want this assignment or this?"
Right.
And I didn't ever officially say, "No, I'm not in the business anymore." I just
Right.
They could see that the art was taken over. In fact, they encouraged. You know, they would come to my shows, and they were supportive. You know, so.
So now this time you had how many kids did you have when you started with Suzanne Brown? How many kids?
3, I think.
Yeah, so you had mouths to feed. And did you go and say, okay, I've got Suzanne Brown, she's a great gallery. Can I go and find another gallery?
I had other galleries, actually had galleries coming to me
At that point. So
Yeah.
once you got in good recognition and people started to realize, hey, this is somebody who has a unique voice, you had galleries that were coming to you.
Yeah, that's a scary thing too, of course, because
It is.
I've been with a lot of galleries over the years. I'm going to estimate 30,
Wow.
and they come and go, and there's a lot of them are not very ethical, and I've had legal issues with over the years with some,
Yeah.
and some don't know anything, you know.
Yeah, what's the worst thing that's happened that a gallery's done to you that you can talk about?
I helped send a lady to jail from near Santa Barbara. She would sell paintings, and then she wouldn't tell the artists.
Right.
Or she had a secret warehouse she would take stuff and put in there, and then when the artist would ask her about the painting, she'd say, I don't know, somebody stole that thing, or you know. And so anyway, I got a call from the FBI one day saying, we'd like to use your case to prosecute this lady, and so we had a bunch of interviews and all that.
Right.
Anyway, they had convicted her. And
So she was doing this to a lot of artists.
yeah, several.
Well, and I think that's important for artists out there to realize that you do need to check into the references of the galleries that say they're going to represent your work. You need to get good paperwork at all times. When you drop off paintings, don't drop them off. Make sure there's some kind of consignment form that goes with it, and photograph your own paintings, and then check in periodically, make sure everything's going well, and because sometimes galleries will do that. They'll sell a painting and they won't tell you, and they might have not tell you for a long time. And
You guys have been great, by the way, and not patronizing, but you've been the example of how it should work.
Yeah, we take it as a real business. It's really important because you have to first of all, you're dealing with artists' lives, and you're dependent upon us to pay you, do the best we can, and if we don't sell art, you don't eat. That's a big responsibility I always take on my own end. That if I'm not making sales, that somebody's not getting their teeth done, or they're putting off something because they have to wait. And I couldn't be an artist for that. I think for that very reason, because you have to depend on other galleries to make sure they're doing their job, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
So it's more hard on my wife than myself, because I'm sort of happily oblivious, because I was making my art, sending it out there,
Right.
and there seemed to be sales, and but I wasn't paying attention for a long time to all of that. And my wife would say, well, where's this, where's that, where's,
Right.
the checkbook is run up. In fact, they gave me a poster one time, I can't be overdrawn, I still have checks left. that was me, So
Well, I have to share what you did when I've been representing you for almost 25 years, I think. It's been a very long time, and I knew you were great. I owe a lot of my success actually to you, because when you're starting off as an art dealer and you want to get good artists, you were a well-known, recognized artist. I loved your work, thought you were important, but why should you go with me? Right? Why do you want to go with a young upstart, gallerist? What's in it for you? What's the upside, if any? And so I remember trying to get you to come aboard, and your response was more of, "Well, you going to be in business in 5 years?" Do you remember that?
that would have been a concern.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I think you're afraid because I was a doctor that this is more of just kind of a passing little hobby or something. I'm assuming that was what it was.
well, as I said, I've been in lots of galleries, and a lot of them are the wives of very successful doctors or lawyers or whatever
Right.
who want to do something, so they start a gallery, and after they see that it's a lot of work and they've exhausted that interest,
Right. They move on.
the gallery goes away, you know. Which I'll have to tell you, the interesting thing about Suzanne Brown, her reason she could do that was her husband Jack had one of the biggest law firms in the West.
Mm-hmm.
In downtown Phoenix. They had 5 floors on Central Avenue.
Wow.
And we found out later that whenever she needed to sell a painting, she'd call up Jack and say, "You need a painting." And so after about, I don't know, 20 years, they had a big party at the firm, and we went to it. Here's 5 floors of me and Ed and every artist that she represented.
Right.
Every time things were slow in the gallery,
Yeah.
Jack would buy a painting, you know.
That was
Yeah.
good for both people, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it was actually turned out to be a very good investment for her.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
I'm not complaining, but
Yeah.
it was interesting, you know. So without Jack, it would have been
Much more difficult.
difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's selling art is an interesting proposition, and finding that right gallery is a really hard thing. But, you know, when you do find a gallery that really works for you, I mean, we've had I just think we have such an easy-go-lucky relationship because we both know what we expect. You expect me to do my job and sell paintings, and I expect you to get me great paintings on a regular basis, and that's kind of been the way it's gone for 2 decades.
Yeah, it's been good. You guys have been great. And again, I think even more is encouraging me to try whatever
Yeah, I
wanted
like
to
it.
try,
I love
you
that.
know.
I love seeing when you bring in like your fence posts that you
Yeah.
did. I thought those were just brilliant.
It's not everything's going to work probably, unless you're Ed Mill. Everything works for Ed Mill.
I'll ask him that when I have him on. Howard says everything works for you.
Yeah.
Well, everything pretty much works for you too, I would say. In fact, you've got a big major show, that's a museum show that's been going on now for over a year, I think, or close to
No.
it. It's going to be when it's all
It'll
said
be
and done.
about a year when it's done.
Yeah. So it started in the booth. This was a retrospective. Then it went to Tucson Museum of Art, and now it just opened this week or last week, I guess, at Wickenburg. What's that all? What does that feel like to have a major museum show?
Desert Caballeros
Desert
Museum.
Caballeros. Mm-hmm.
Well, at first you're a little concerned, like, does this mean I'm old and near death, you know, and that I'm done, you know, like, wrap it up, you know, but they assured me that it was more a celebration of 40 years of career, you know. So,
Right.
So they have paintings from 40 years through till the present, you know, and so it's a buzz, you know. I mean, it's to go in there and to see all those old pieces
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning. That's cool, and someone would think you're important enough to do that kind of a show for you. You know, that's
Well, you had a big book that was done too. The
Yeah.
University of New Mexico Press published it, right?
they distributed it.
Yeah.
It was,
Distributed.
yeah, that's another thing. So, yeah, my wife says you can go ahead and die now. You've had a book and you've had a big
3 museum show, and you're in a lot of museums too. You're
Yeah.
in probably a dozen museums, major museums as well. Does that feel odd to go into a museum and see your artwork on the wall that they have? You know, like Phoenix Art Museum bought a major work of yours.
Yeah, in Denver, they have a couple
Yeah.
of the most major ones, as well as the Tucson one.
Yeah.
My grandkids think it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know? We took them down to the show, and they, they spent about the first 15 minutes. It was pretty exciting. Then they were bored, you know.
Yeah.
But they thought it was cool, you know. Grandpa's been around enough, and people respect his work enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, it's cool. I have another one coming up at the Eiteljorg
Yeah, that's right.
in
That's
September.
right?
So every year they give an award for the artist of distinction and give them a one-man show at the museum. So that one's,
And how long will that be up? That show.
I believe it's 2 or 3 months. maybe.
Yeah, and that's in Indianapolis, and that's when they have their big show in September.
In conjunction with
Yeah.
Quest for the West, which
Yeah.
was the invitational show opens at the same time. So, yeah, that's kind of cool. It's
When you look back at one of those shows, like at the one that's right now at the in Wickenburg at Desert Caballeros, and you see this body of work that spans 40 years, do you see the same person from the beginning to the end? Do you still, or do you go, wow, this stuff that I really did early on is not that great compared to what it is now? How do you view that?
two or three things hit my mind. One is the first thing I look at them and go, I need to fix that. You know, almost every artist I know has that sensation when you see work. You
Right.
Like, I need to fix that, or I should have changed that. You know, I should have, self-critiquing and
Right.
not really satisfied. But you have to let that go because you have no control. But then I look back and see some of that early stuff. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's some of the best stuff, because it was innovative.
Mm-hmm.
It was fresh. Nobody had done anything like it before, It was all me, and me exploring.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see those early ones, I think remember how exciting that was to make that discovery, And the technique may not have been as polished or finished, but the concepts were fresh and exciting.
Yes.
Not to say that. I'm still trying to keep it fresh now.
Yeah, no, you still do things that today that are very. I go, wow, that's just amazing. I've never seen anything like that. And one of the things that I think sets you apart from your peers is your color sensibility. Talk about a little bit about that, because, well, first of all, Howard Post horse could be anywhere from yellow to purple, and what is it that gives you that unique sense of color composition?
Yeah, people have asked about my color theory, which there is no color theory.
It's the Howard Post color theory.
So I've tried not to have a predetermined sense of what it should be. Obviously, all my work is initially inspired by reality, either a real place or a real animal or a real something. So it all starts there, but after I get the drawing down, and then I think, well, I'm not obligated to paint it like it is. I'm not one who's trying to convey a certain place. If I had a commission to paint Picacho Peak, I would be careful about making sure it was
At least somewhat look like Picacho Peak.
And I've been commissioned over the years to do actually people portraits, horse portraits, cow portraits, ranch portraits, So in those cases, of course, pay attention to detail and accuracy. But aside from that, I'm not obligated to convey the reality of it, just like I'm sure Dixon took liberties. He was...
Oh, for sure. He edited constantly.
Everybody takes liberties, really. So I just try to have fun with it, and whatever my innate sense of color says this horse should be a balance, whether it should be yellow, red, black, or white,
But they're unique colors too. I can tell your painting's a mile away. Your colors are just so specific for you.
Yeah, I don't know how that came about, really. I used the same 12 colors on my palette since 1980, So, but out of those 12, you can get everything, right? You can.
Yeah.
I can make any color I want from them. So, I can't give you.
That's good. Because you can't do that, or you can't tell me why exactly. I think is one of the reasons that it sets you apart, because in today's world, I see so often that somebody who's a very successful artist like yourself, then other artists who are just getting started, or maybe not even just getting started, go, I'll just try to do what he's doing because it sells and people like it. But they always get stuck on the color. They can't they might can try to do your graphics a little bit, but they can't do the colors at all. So I think they just give up, which is a wonderful place to be. And that's one of the reasons I think it makes you so unique. in this world of art that's, you know, sometimes repetitive, is that you have your own sense of color, and your compositions are unique and different. I know Howard Post when I see it a mile away, and everyone else does too.
Yeah, people say that all the time.
Yep, it's true.
They come up to me at the shows, and they may not even like the piece, you know, but they say, "Hey, man, we just want you to know we can, we recognize your stuff, you know. The minute we walk in this show, we know your work, you know, and that's, which is a nice thing. We hope they like it, you know.
Yeah.
And on the other, you know, that color minus, I don't have a preconceived thing about the color, but there are artists who, for instance, George Carlson, who's one of my heroes.
Yeah, he should be. He's fantastic.
He's very analytical. He has a palette worked out to the
he does
10th degree, you know, and when he paints, it's very
measured.
Yeah, I was going to say clinical, but his paintings don't come off as clinical. I mean, I love him, you know. He and I were talking at the Prix de West, you know, and it just takes him so long to apply the 4, 5, 6 layers of color, you know, and part of it's very analytical, you know. But they're beautiful nonetheless. So everybody has their own approach, and because I've described mine to you doesn't mean I'm suggest that's the way it should be or has to be for anybody, you know. So.
Well, one of the other things I found is that you are very careful not letting a painting out that you don't think's good. And how did that come about? I mean, is because, you know, I wouldn't call you a slow painter, but you're methodical, and we don't get that many out, that much production, which I like to some extent, but they're always great. I mean, they're always very consistent. Is that something you do by design, by choice, or it's just something in you that goes, it's got to be this level of quality, or it's not coming out of my studio?
I think I failed on that goal sometimes. There's things that get out that after they're out there, I'd like to
reel them back in,
get them back, you know. And excuse me. The way I approach it is, so I start like a dozen canvases in my studio, and get them started to a point, and then I review them, you know, and decide if I think they're worthy of going on to a finished painting, you know. And if they're not, I either paint over them or store them in the corner until I can look at them again someday. So out of that 12 paintings, there may be 3 that don't go any farther. You know, they get tossed or stashed away or something. You know, so I can kind of tell at that early stage if they're going to make it. You know.
Is that a compositional thing?
Composition, concept. Composition is so important. Design, you know. I mean, if you don't have a good composition, I could paint it. I could execute it to the 10th degree, and it still wouldn't
resonate.
Wouldn't be good, you know.
And do you? So, are you still pushing that envelope, looking for new compositions? I mean, I know you are, but maybe you can just address that.
I mean, obviously there are only so many ways to arrange things on a canvas, you know. But I try to be open to new approaches, new visuals, new perspectives, you know. And there's always the same ones that keep coming back in because they're there, you know, the overhead view, the bird's eye view. I love that. So I don't want to beat it to death, so I don't do it every painting, you know. I mean,
but you like it. You like it. Yeah. It gives you joy to paint.
You bet.
Yeah.
I still have fun looking for the natural design qualities in the West, you know, whether it's corals. I always keep coming back to corals because I just love the angularity and the abstract quality in the corals. And, the mountains, of course, have the same thing, you know. But a lot of people paint mountains, you know. Not everybody paints corals.
It's true. There's something unique about corrals in the West. You know, I grew up in eastern New Mexico where we have lots of corrals, lots of cattle and ranches and things like that. And you know, you just see one of those abandoned chutes. And there's something, you know, very Donald Judd-ish about it, you know, this abstract quality to it. And do you remember when you did your first corral like that? It was early on, right?
Those were the first things I did, and back when I was getting my master's, you know, when my professor friend sent me out to my dad's place to do my own thing, the first thing that buzzed me was the corral, the abstract compositions of the corral. So that's when those started.
Really early on.
Yeah, and I pushed on some other things. You have a painting in here of the white horse. Was from that era.
Yeah, it's really early.
There's no corrals, but it was, I think it was a fresh approach at a horse, you know. And so I was trying to find approaches that were unique to my sensibilities, or at least I hadn't noticed anybody else doing them. I was trying not to pay attention to what anybody else was doing there, but then when you start going into the galleries and being in shows, of course, you see what everybody else is doing. That's a challenge, you know. I mean, to not be influenced by other people. On the other hand, you need to learn from them, you know. If there's, yeah, you need to learn from them.
Howard, we've learned a lot today from you. Thank you for coming on the Art Dealer Diaries. Thank you for being just a good human being and a great artist, and I look forward to another 20 years.
Me too.
Yeah, let's raise your prices.
Today?
Why not?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You better hurry, you know. You never know how long a guy's going to be around, right?
I hope you're around a lot longer.
One more horse wreck might do it.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, Howard. How about let's go eat some lunch?
Likewise, let's do that.
All right,
cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it. All right, Howard Pope.